Welcome to This Lawyer's Life, a podcast of the New York City Bar Association. Today we meet Chaula Shukla, Manager of Legal Recruiting and Learning and Development at Sullivan Cromwell. Chaula possesses a wealth of knowledge about navigating a legal career and creating opportunities for growth, not least because her own career has been filled with opportunities that she engineered.
So it was through a rejection that came this connection. It's such a blessing.
Chaula and Greg talked about building a supportive professional ecosystem.
I had a colleague who said it's a way of making like a professional friend. So sometimes it's just about that human connection.
We really dug into the details of how to know when it's time to make a move in your career. Throughout this conversation, Chaula kept stressing that you should give yourself the credit you deserve and go for it.
Regardless of what your experience is, you have like that secret sauce. You have that special quality that someone is looking for.
Opinions expressed are those of the speakers and not necessarily of the City Bar. Here's your host, Gregory Binstock.
Welcome to This Lawyer's Life, a professional development podcast where we talk with lawyers about seizing opportunities, learning lessons the hard way, and about what makes them tick. I'm Gregory Binstock, Director of Professional Development here at the New York City Bar Association, and today I have the pleasure to chat with Chaula Shukla. Chaula Shukla, you're Manager of Legal Recruiting and Learning and Development at Sullivan Cromwell. Your career has taken you from social work to public interest law to law school career development, and now to law firm professional development. You're co-chair of the City Bar's Career Advancement and Management Committee, and to all of this, you've brought your perspective as a first-generation lawyer. And now you're here with us. Welcome, Chaula.
Thank you so much, Greg. It's an honor to be here, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Let's start by talking a little bit about your career path so we can understand the moves you've made. I mentioned some of them, from social work to becoming a first-gen lawyer in public interest, and then over to the law school admin side, and now into firm PD, as I mentioned. So just walk us through some of these moves and how this all worked for you.
Absolutely, yes. So I come from an immigrant family. My parents immigrated here from India. I was actually born in India, and we immigrated here when I was a baby. So just growing up, really as the first daughter, I have two younger sisters. So I was the pioneer of all things here in terms of just the education system and career path. I went to SUNY Albany and I majored in English and women's studies. And I was always really interested in the law. A lot of my family is in medicine, and I just knew that wasn't the path that I wanted to take. I just always was really interested in writing, reading. I used to watch legal dramas on TV, and I was like, wow, this is so amazing. And just seeing really strong lawyers in the courtroom really advocate for their client, that all really appealed to me. But I think that like many students I've spoken to and like many people, I remember studying for the LSAT and it just didn't really go my way when I was an undergrad. I took it as a sign that maybe I wasn't ready, and I sort of went to a different path, which was social work. And I think that was something that also really interested me because I think ultimately law is a profession about helping people as a social work. So I went to NYU, I got my MSW. It was a 2-year program, and a lot of people in the program were really focused on being a counselor and therapy. But I was just focused on working with different clients from diverse backgrounds. I actually worked in a substance abuse clinic. During grad school, had an experience working at a small high school in the Bronx, like working with adolescents. And then I worked at a hospital doing discharge planning in like an inpatient settings. I was a very idealistic, bright-eyed person when I was in grad school, and I really just wanted to make a difference. After practicing as a social worker for a few years and working, I just decided that I was ready to pursue my dream of going to law school again. I took the LSAT again, did a lot better, went to Albany Law, and after law school, I worked in the clinic at Albany Law School where I worked with clients, but also worked with law students. In a clinical setting, you have clients who come to you who are usually low-income clients, and you provide pro bono legal services. But you also get the sort of safety net and security of it being a learning experience. You have a professor who's supervising you, and often staff attorney or a fellow or someone else in the clinic, paralegals, and you have a lot of support. So I worked in that setting and I enjoyed it. I also spent some time working at Legal Aid. of Northeastern New York, also providing pro bono legal services to low-income clients. And I really enjoyed practicing law, but I sort of had some personal changes and life changes, and I moved from Capital Region down to the New York City area. And that was a really pivotal time in my career where I decided to actually stop practicing and focus on working with law students more closely. And I think one of the experiences that really was transformative for me was over the summer in 2019, I actually taught as a kind of a subbed in for somebody last minute, but I taught this 10-week externship course. A lot of times students, you have an externship over the summer or field placement, and you do a course in conjunction with that where you talk about what's going on in your field placement, you talk about your professional development and lawyering and things like that. And I got to teach this class. It was my first foray into actually instructing, and it was a great group of students. I really enjoyed the idea of sort of that mentoring and also working with law students and thinking about their careers, since I had gone through this non-traditional path of being a social worker and then going to law school a little bit older. I had this very public interest bend. I was a social worker and then I was really interested in family law and things like that. So I thought it was really great to be able to use also my experience as a first-gen student to teach this class, and hearing some of the students' feedback and just being able to work with them in that way. I really liked it. So I started thinking about what my next step would be, and I was connected to some great people who work in the city in the career development space, one of whom became a great mentor and friend to me, who I'll definitely talk more about, connected with me with the New York City Bar. So there was all these different kind of ways that I found this path. And then spending a few years as career counselor, I was actually started this new career right before the COVID pandemic hit. So I started my job in December of 2019 as a career advisor at Cardozo. And then it was a new job. I moved down back to Westchester, where I'm from. And then we have this global pandemic. Working and supporting students during that time in that space, I definitely think I relied a lot on the social work, the counseling background, public interest lawyering, all the things that I had learned. I was able to really use that when I was working with law students, and I was focused on public interest careers initially when I was a career advisor. Following work at Cardozo, I went to Columbia, where I worked as a 1L advisor. So I did a little bit both public interest counseling, but also just private sector advising as well. And then from there, I made this really big other leap to working at a law firm. And I started off in recruiting, and then my role shifted. And it's really exciting. I get to do some learning and development work here at the firm. So supporting the trainings we do, mentorship program, summer orientation, lots of really great things. So I know that's been a long kind of road and journey with lots of twists and turns. And every step of the way, I think what has really kept me having great mentors and people who've been able to give me really great advice, being connected with the New York City Bar. If you look at my resume, you're like, wow, it's definitely been a unique path. Every step I've made, one thing sort of built on the other, and I've used my experiences as a social worker, public interest attorney, law school career advisor, to now working in a firm. Everything has come together in this really nice way, and I just think I've been super fortunate to work at places that works.
From what I'm hearing, it sounds like one of the stories you're telling is about connecting with people and helping people and how that works throughout. And it makes me want to know, we're going to talk about a few different things, obviously, but one of the things we're going to explore, interviewing and job shifting, because you're in a position where you've been on both sides of the table. How do you spin that story when you're trying to explain to a law firm why you are the right person for someone in recruiting, when that's not necessarily your background? I'm already starting to build the story for you in my head because the way my brain works. How do you do that?
It's not easy, because I think that law firms, like many places, are really risk averse, right? So, and when you're hiring, you really want to hire someone who you feel is going to come in and be really suited for the position, and that they're familiar with what the expectations are. And I mean, I have to be honest, and this is not false modesty. I mean, I do struggle with imposter syndrome and things like that, but I really surprised when I was interviewing for law firm I worked at. I was going through the interview process, and at every turn I was just almost surprised. It was I was surprising myself. It's when you order something on Amazon, you forget you order it, and then you get it in the mail and you're like, this is so exciting. Wow. I went truly like felt surprised that I was advancing because I really, as a public interest lawyer, a social worker working in law school settings, like I never worked in a corporate environment. I never really worked at a law firm. I never had like billable hours, or I never worked in the corporate space. And my parents, as I mentioned, aren't lawyers. And so I was surprised, but I think what really helped me was, I think, building a network, and through career advancement and management committee and mentors, I got a perspective into what it was like to make that transition. So a lot of great people who work in the professional development space and the recruiting space, things like that, were able to give me advice on how my resume should look, what kind of questions I should be asking, how I should be marketing myself, what kind of opportunities there are in firms. I mean, I didn't even know how many different types of opportunities law firms have for people who are essentially non-practicing, but in roles that support lawyers. And there's DEI, there's recruiting, there's attorney development, there's alumni networks, like there's career counseling, there's so many different things. And I had to really, I think it was a journey to parse out what types of roles I would be suited for and what skills were that I had that I was bringing to the table. But as I mentioned, one of my great friends and mentors, Laura Vix, I'm going to shout her out. She's awesome. I actually connected with her when she was working at Cardozo, and I had an informational interview with her. So I remember I reached out to her, cold emailed her, was given her name by when he knew her through Nell. I reached out. She agreed to meet me for coffee, and we met for coffee. We had this like great conversation, and I just talked to her about my background, why I was interested in career advising. And then I ended up getting hired at it. And I was actually like simultaneously interviewing to work at Cardozo where she worked. And it ended up that I got the job and we were colleagues. Then we had this, like I said, this great coffee. I remember we were joking about what reality TV shows we watched. Like we were just building a rapport, and we really hit it off. And she was a part of NELP, part of the New York City Bar. And she really set me up and introduced me to all of these great networks that I'm a part of now. So I always tell her, and she jokes, you're always hyping me up. And I said, no, like you really have made such a difference in my life. And so she made the transition to work at a law firm and told me about the other side and like what to expect. And she was like helping me, putting in a good word for me, and trying to really, there's mentors and there's sponsors, and there's lots of literature and things about what it means to be sponsored, but it's basically someone that's really putting your name out there and talking about you in a really positive way and manifesting really good things for you. So when I was interviewing again for the law firm, I think what really helped me was I felt really confident because I applied to other roles and had interviews or things not work out that either friends or former colleagues had recommended me for. But I think I just realized that I had to really market this special combination of skills and this sort of secret sauce that I had, and go into the experience feeling really confident in what my abilities were and why I would be a good candidate for a role in recruiting. And I think, though I had never done recruiting before, every firm, every place has different processes and does things differently. So I was just coming in as a fresh kind of blank canvas. So I came into a situation saying, I don't have any sort of ideas of what should be done or how things should be done. I'm here to really learn. And being on the school side of things, I think, was really a valuable and unique quality because you can really speak to what law students, what a lot of whom are Gen Z, what is going on in the minds of law students, what are the behind the scenes thing that goes on the law school side of things, and sort of took all that and parlayed it into this opportunity. But I think like just really being more confident in myself and how to really market myself. And also I do think it's like sometimes the timing is like with everything. And I know I have colleagues who use like a lot of dating analogies when they're talking about like interviewing, but I do think like with anything, any kind of relationship, when you're interviewing or on the job search, sometimes it really is about the right opportunity at the right time. And yeah, just really putting yourself out there in a way and just being really confident and comfortable with where you are in your career. And then I think I got to a good place with that. So I'm just super fortunate to be where I am now.
And what kind of concrete advice do you give people to demonstrate the confidence that I'm hearing now? Sounds like that comes naturally to you, but maybe not. But I'm sure you have many students and people that you're coaching where they say, yeah, but how do you do that? What if I don't have that background? What if they ask me X? How do you coach them from that?
No, I think it's really hard. And I've definitely struggled with confidence, especially career-wise. I mean, I've gone through a lot of struggles. I've been really hard on myself. I've doubted myself a lot. I'm consistently hard on myself. And unfortunately, I'm sometimes the type of person who will focus on, something negative that has happened or that I've done or sad versus a ton other great positive things. Like I do. Sometimes we are all, I think at times, our own worst critic. So I think the confidence piece is really hard to achieve, especially when you're starting out. It's really hard because sometimes you'll go into an interview and you won't really know, how to navigate certain situations, certain questions. But I think what's been helpful and what concrete advice I would give is think about things you've accomplished. Look at your resume, look at your job experiences, and make a list, write down, at this job I did, and it went really well. This job I did Y and Z, and then these are some of the skills that I've developed. So what are often students will say, you don't need to have legal experience to have an interview that's legal in nature or have experience, but you could say, I've worked with students. I remember I was once working with a student who had started a company. They got a puppy and they decided that they wanted to create an app for people who needed a dog walker. So they were like, oh, I created this in my neighborhood, and anybody who needed a dog walker, I was helping walk dogs and connecting them to people who could walk dogs. And I was thinking, wow, this is great. First of all, everybody, who wouldn't love a puppy or dog? People are obsessed with their pets. You're entrepreneurial, you're tech savvy, and you are really, I think that's such a valuable thing to talk about in an interview. You saw a need for a service and you implemented this strategy to address it. And I think that, when you're a barista, when you're a bartender, when you're a camp counselor, when you're a nanny, I mean, I talk to so many students who've nannied, and I'm like, people are trusting you with their children. There could be an emergency situation that comes up and you're the first line of defense. And so, I mean, talking about things that you've done where people have put trust in you, where you've provided a service to people. So I think thinking of the things you've accomplished and really thinking about what skills are involved in those things and building yourself up again, regardless of what your experience is, you have that secret sauce. You have that special quality that someone is looking for, and you really just have to drill down what it is. And I think that when you're thinking of coming from a place of strength and coming from a place of believing in yourself, of course, we all have things, and I can certainly address those of we feel uncomfortable talking about. It could be a grade that wasn't favorable, or it could be a gap in your resume. All of those things you can address. And of course, feedback too, or something that hasn't gone your way. But what's important is the whole cliche with interviews is when they ask you what your weakness is or what your area of improvement is, it should be something that's secretly positive. Oh, I work too hard. I'm too committed to my work. I have no boundaries. But I think what it really is about, rather than it being a weakness, is really thinking about an area of improvement and how you're addressing it. So if your area of improvement is you don't love public speaking, but you're trying to get a job that might require you to do some public speaking. I had a friend who was in Toastmasters, which is this group where you work on your public speaking skills, and they said that really helped them in their business life. And so saying I'm a part of this group, or I'm volunteering more in classroom settings where I have to present something, or I'm taking more opportunities where I have to do that. You have a great story to have actually about confidence that I want to share. The idea of networking and putting yourself out there is, I think this is just an amazing story. But I have a 5-year-old daughter. She's 5.5. And one day I took her and we were sitting outside at this pizzeria, and I was with my sister. And there was a group of young girls. I don't know their ages. They couldn't have been older than maybe 13. I want to say, I'm bad at guessing ages, but they're a group of, let's say, preteen girls. And one of the girls left the group and walked up to my sister and I, and my sister was holding my daughter. So she said to my sister, "Is that your daughter?" And my sister said, "No, that's her mom. That's my sister." So she turned to me and she just said, "Oh, how old's your daughter?" And at the time, I think she was maybe 3. Oh, she's 3. She's, "Well, I just wanted to introduce myself to you." She introduces herself and she said, "I'm a certified babysitter, and I'm trained in first aid, and I babysit in this neighborhood," and proceeds to hand me a business card, a literal business card with her information. And it was really colorful, and it was just it was eye-catching. And she was trying to find out where I lived and stuff, and just was like, "Yeah, if you ever need a babysitter, please reach out." And then she walked away. I was floored. And I just turned to my sister and I said, she's going to like be CEO. She's going to be president. She's going to rule the world. I mean, her confidence level. And the other thing I really admired is I was a perfect stranger. She felt comfortable enough to walk up to me and introduce herself. And I know that not everybody is equipped to do that. So I want to make it clear. But I just thought I just think that always stuck out in my mind as like a way to just say, wow, like she just really felt good about this business and this brand that she's building for herself. And in terms of babysitting, and I did a lot of babysitting too. And it was usually like a lot of word of mouth. But yeah, the idea that you're like, hey, I see a mom, I see a child. Here you go. Here's my business card. So I don't know. I just think that always stuck out to me too. Like that was really cool. So
That's incredible. I guess you have to start early these days. Good for her. Let's talk for a minute about changing job. You mentioned you've had a few changes in your career. How long is the appropriate time these days before you may consider changing jobs? What's the ethos in the law environment?
yeah, I think that's a great question. And again, I know that I've been talking a lot about my work and career in the lens of pre-COVID and post-COVID. I have to say that my mother has worked at the same hospital for almost 30 years. So I remember I was in elementary school and my mom got a job at the hospital and she started out as a phlebotomist and then she worked her way up and is now supervisor at a lab. She's had the same colleagues for the same amount of time. And so she's never left. And there's a lot of people, I think, who just find something and that's where they are and that's where they are forever. And it can happen beginning or middle or end of your career. Sometimes you just find something and that's your place and that's where you retire from. I will say every time I applied for and interviewed for a job, I've always wanted it to be, forever job and had those intentions and didn't really take things or do things like thinking, okay, I mean, I don't think I'm going to spend a long time here. I mean, I know sometimes, or maybe subconsciously that was my thinking, but I think that to really get to understand what a job is, especially when I was like in a law school, you have to go, or any job, you have to go through a full year of the cycle of what that year is, right? So for law school, the fall through the spring and then the summer, you go through the 4 seasons. And I think you can get a sense of what it is. I think the first 3 to 6 months are obviously you're just really learning and getting onboarded and getting to know people and getting to know how the job is. I mean, I don't have an answer because I've definitely made career moves. Like I've stayed in a place a year or 2 years and I've moved around a bunch. I think that it really just depends on what the job is and how you feel about it. I think unfortunately a lot of us have been in situations where we've been unhappy with a job or it's not really working out for us. I obviously can see the employer's perspective where it is look to interview, hire someone. It can take a really long time and it takes a lot of resources, right? Like you have to create a job posting, you have to really advertise and like market that you're looking for somebody. You have to meet with lots of different candidates, look at resumes, schedule interviews, get everyone schedule coordinated to like interview candidates and go through all this deliberation. It's really hard, right? Like for employers to have a lot of turnover and it's not an ideal situation on the employer side. But I think that if you're somewhere and it's really not working out for you, I think that sometimes better to just leave and then figure out what the right thing is for you because then it's not really benefiting anybody. So I don't know. I think that I don't really have a good, strong answer, but I think that sometimes your life changes and an opportunity presents itself to you. And the timing, as I said earlier, is just right for something else.
So I know you've taken advantage of so many different opportunities in the course of your career. Do you think sometimes about some of the things that didn't happen or that you didn't take?
I try not to have FOMO or like the sliding doors. What if I did this or what if I did that? So I think, and I know that sounds, oh, of course you're just saying that, but I truly mean it. I mean, I think that certainly there were opportunities that I didn't get. Actually, there was lots of different opportunities that would have taken me in a totally different direction in terms of my career. For example, staying in the clinic space, continuing to practice, or doing something entirely different, or not going to law school, or going to law school, or not going to graduate school, or things like that. I really am a believer that things happen for a reason and that the universe is sort of plans and that your career is mapped out in the way that it should be, and that I've just been really grateful for the opportunities that I've had. And I've really believed that the opportunities that didn't work out, or that I didn't either take or didn't take me, right, are opportunities that just weren't right and weren't going to be a good fit. So I kind of got my answer there. And I think one thing I will share and one thing I will say, and I emphasize this when I was career advising, is try to just listen to your gut and listen to your instincts. I think that like for a long time, it took me a really long time, and I still struggle with listening to my instincts and my gut about things. But if you have a gut feeling about something or an opportunity or something being wrong or something being right, or you really wanting to go for something, then you should listen to that and listen to what your instincts are. People don't often put themselves out there for roles unless they think they have the exact qualifications that the role is looking for. And I feel like my advice or my perspective is you should go for it. You could be kind of shutting yourself off from opportunities that like would work out because you feel like, oh, they wouldn't want to look at my resume, or that's not worth applying, or they wouldn't interview me. I think it's important to just put yourself out there and then let the employer decide whether they want to bring you in for an interview and things like that. I really feel like the worst thing that can happen is that they know. So if you feel like you have experiences or a background that's aligned with what the role is, if you think it's like something more senior maybe than what you're doing now, or you never know, like you should just apply for it, see what happens. Was thinking about coming on here was I actually knew someone who was a lawyer, went to law school, graduated, practiced law, and they had a really transformative experience giving birth and left law and became a labor and delivery nurse. And they're now a nurse, like in maternity for. So, I mean, talk about a pivot transition. I mean, that was like, I just remember thinking, and I just remember being really in awe and admiring that so much that they just went through something that they felt like they had the experience and they really thought it was a career change that they wanted to make, and went through the process of applying to nursing school, going to nursing school, and they're now in a totally different career. So I think that like something is speaking to you. It's not too late. I think at any point in your life, you could decide you have a passion. I would like to be a cheesemonger. So just kind of, that's my retirement career. You have to put in a lot of hours to be a cheesemonger. I've like already looked into it, but I love cheeses and stuff. So anyway, yeah, no, I think that you should just go for whatever you're interested in, what you're passionate about. And I think in terms of looking back, I think there's something that I would have, I think, wish I had taken or done differently, because I just think it's all kind of flowed along the way that it's meant to be.
Let's circle back for a minute to the mentoring and networking aspect. You mentioned Laura, who you gave a nice shout out to. And I think you mentioned that you cold emailed her. How did you even think to do that? Or what was she doing that it interested you? And can you expand more on that relationship and what it's meant to you? And also to follow up, how you deploy that for others as you now counsel first years and have counseled in the past law students?
Absolutely. So I had actually applied to a job that I didn't get. And the person who didn't give me the offer actually personally called me to thank me for interviewing, and that they went in a different direction, but that they supported my interest in becoming a career advisor and making that transition, and put me in touch with people in their network who do career advising. And Laura happened to be one of those people. So it was through a rejection that came this connection. It's such a blessing. And through Laura, I've met Robbie Margolis, who's the current chair of CAM. He's also been a really great mentor to me, and so many other people. I can go on and name so many people who I've been connected through Laura and her amazing network. And again, I think that when you're networking, people always groan when they hear networking. But when you're networking, I think that in the legal profession too, people understand networking and are really savvy to it. A lot of what I've heard students say or people say is it's so awkward to come into a conversation with somebody like with an agenda. It's awkward to have to feel like you're asking somebody for something who you don't know, who's like a perfect stranger to you. And they don't really know who you are. And that obviously you have, your intention is really just to learn more about a career path. Or maybe your intention is, I applied for a job at X employer and I want to network with somebody who's there, and maybe if they make a good impression on them, they'll put in a good word for me or something like that. And that's what was sort of happening. There was incidentally this job, and I connected with Laura, and she was able to go back and say, oh, I met with this person and I thought they were, cool. I think the most important thing is it's okay to have an ask, but just know what that ask is. And you can be direct about it, but you can also, I think, so your ask could be, I would love if you could introduce me to a few people that do X, or do you know anybody in your network who I can maybe connect with? Or your ask could be, I just really want to learn, or a tip about what I should say. I'm going on this interview for X tomorrow. The one thing I will say that's really important about networking, mentoring, is it's really important to follow up. If somebody takes the time to meet with you, have coffee with you, look at your resume, prep you for an interview, give you advice on something, you should always do your best to follow up and thank them. And genuinely just say, listen, I really appreciated you taking the time to meet with me and to talk about this. Thank you so much. And I try to do this, and I know that sometimes you're like having a lot of different conversations, especially if you're job searching or you're making a transition, a career transition. Let's say you're a new graduate. You're probably having a lot of different conversations, and sometimes it's hard to keep track of everyone you've messaged on LinkedIn or sent your resume to or tried to network with. But try to follow up and give them an update on like where you landed. So if someone preps you for an interview and then you get an offer, follow up with that person and say, thank you so much. I just wanted to let you know I got an offer. Thank you for your advice. Another thing is like sometimes it's about human connection. So I remember I was at a conference and someone was talking about that they had this like life-changing croissant at this cafe in Portland. And I remember I went to the cafe and I emailed them. I said, I have that croissant, and you're right. It was flaky and it was amazing. And I had a latte and it was like such a lovely afternoon. And thanks for that great recommendation. So it could just be following up with them. And I remember there was a student I advised that remembered, and was a career advisor, and they remembered things about like my daughter and would sometimes say, oh, how's your daughter doing? I don't know, that made me really happy. It was like this human connection that they remembered that. So it wasn't just like this transactional thing. So if someone like slips in like, oh yeah, my child, my pet, or this trip, or this person, or something I'm doing, or something I'm really excited about, try to remember like little details, and then you could try bring it back to the conversation and say, oh, like I saw that movie you recommended, or I read that book that you were mentioning, would be really helpful. Everyone's a person at the end of the day. And I do think for me, the follow-up is really great. And again, it's hard. And sometimes I get busy, people get busy, you forget. But I actually knew someone who they would always send everyone in their professional network a Happy New Year email, and it would be like, Happy New Year, like how are your holidays? And it was just like this really nice way that they're checking in, and it's a new year and you start, and just to say like, hi, how are you? How are things going? And sometimes actually people really, I remember I went past somebody for coffee, just to have coffee with them, and they thought that I was wanting to ask about a job or an opportunity, but I was like, no, I really just wanted to chat with you. I had a colleague who said it's a way of making like a professional friend. So you can think of it like that. And if you're, think about when you're making friends with somebody, like how did you become friends with that person? They were a stranger to you once, right? So you maybe had something in common, or you were at the same event or at the same place at the same time. Maybe you noticed something they were wearing and you complimented it, and then something like that. In law school, there was somebody that complimented a bracelet I was wearing, and then we started talking. They invited me to their house for a party, a Halloween party, and then we became friends. So sometimes it's just about that human connection, and I would try to like take a little bit of that pressure off, and also know that people, if you have a mentor, you have a network, someone you're networking with, just keep in mind what it is that you want to know, want to find out, but make sure that you're like also treating it like a human interaction, not just look at my resume. Okay, thanks. Keeping the dialogue going, following up with them, and being just grateful. I think just thank you goes a long way.
Excellent. You're about to become co-chair of the City Bar's Career Advancement and Management Committee, which the cool kids refer to as CAM. Tell us a little bit about that committee and what it does and how you got involved.
Absolutely. CAM is a Career Advancement and Management Committee of the New York City Bar Association, and it's a group of people who work in law schools, law firms. There's a lot of coaches, consultants, recruiters. We put on programming that's focused on career and professional development and kind of issues that are in the legal world. It's a really great, diverse group that are in the New York City and the greater New York City area. So when I joined, we were completely virtual, and we would have these great monthly meetings where we just really talked about what was going on, and we stormed great ideas for programs that we thought would be interesting. And we're also using taking the work that we're doing and thinking about programs that we could come up with. And and some of the programs have to do with making a career transition. So we did a program on careers in higher education, and we had panelists who had made the pivot from practicing to working at a law school because people are curious about that. We're working at a law firm. We had a great program on giving and receiving feedback. We've had programs on public interest interviewing, programs about like financial things and retiring and just anything you can think of that's really career oriented. And it's just such a great committee. I think it's just a really great community. I remember when I first joined, I would just reach out to people on the committee. I was just this new person, and everyone was so generous with their time and advice. And like sometimes we'll share opportunities that, we hear of like at our employers with each other. And if we know anyone that's interested, it's great for networking too. And I just think like above all, it's just such a kind, like thoughtful, wonderful group of people. And I think the programs that we put on are just really, so we put them on within the New York City Bar, and we just have really everyone on the committee. It's really amazing. I want to give a shout out to Robbie and Lauren, Martha Harris, who is awesome and is just really great. I'm just really honored to be on the committee. And so I've been on it, 4 years, I guess now. Wow. And so myself and Michael Tenenhouse, who's amazing, we're going to be leading as co-chairs, which I'm really excited about because both of us can share, our perspectives and lead the committee. So I'm just really looking forward to the next year. And I would encourage anyone that's interested in CAM who's listening to definitely reach out to me. It's been a wonderful committee to be part of, and it's been a great resource. And the New York City Bar does so much great work, so many great programs. And I also think like for young attorneys and people who are like recent grads or law students or things like that, definitely take advantage of the resources that the New York City Bar has. There's a lot of really great programming and ways to get involved and ways to network with people. And there's just a very supportive community. Because it feels sometimes, wow, the New York City Bar, they're so big, there's so many lawyers in New York City, but it's such a nice community. And I think everyone is just really open to networking and sharing resources. There's no gatekeeping that goes on. Everyone's really just here to share.
Well, good luck with your chairship coming up. That's very good move. I wanted to ask, has a mentor or supervisor ever proactively checked in on your mental health? For example, after particularly grueling week of work?
I've been really fortunate to have a great manager who's very supportive, Rebecca Kalman, who's the director of in the legal talent office, director of legal recruiting and learning and development, who has just taught me so much. And I've learned so much from her in the time that I've been in this role. My sister really tragically passed away in June of 2018. It was really unexpected, and it was just a devastating loss for, the whole family. And during that time, I was pregnant. So there was just a lot of grief and trauma that all of us as a family, my sister, Kina, my parents, we were left with the grief, and it was just extremely difficult and traumatic time. So like, it's really complicated because in different roles, when I started a new role, people don't know the backstory and they don't know necessarily what happened to my sister. So it's hard because it's such a big part of my life. It's a part of my identity that I've lost a sibling. I think sibling loss is really difficult. Anyone who's experienced any kind of loss, it's really hard to talk about. And sometimes you wear it in a way where you're like, this is a part of me. It's a part of who I am. And it's hard to really separate. And I think professionally, sometimes when you're dealing with grief, like you might need time, or sometimes her birthday or the anniversary of her passing. And there's different times where sometimes it just feels raw. I mean, it always does. There's not a day that goes by that it's not difficult. But I just remember when I fairly new in a role, and we did this like icebreaker, and everyone goes around and says something. The prompt was say something about yourself that's not on your resume. And I took that as an opportunity to stand up, and I introduced myself, and I said something about me is my sister passed away. Like started talking a little bit about it and how it's a really big part of my life and my identity. And I sat down and I had a colleague who's now a great friend put her hand on my hand and like just comfort me in that moment. And then I was like, maybe that wasn't a great like icebreaker share. Other people were sharing kind of more light things, but it just I thought was great to just get it out there so people knew. And like my coworker who comforted me and just like other people have been really great about understanding that this is a part of my life and like really sensitive about it. And I've been so fortunate. I've had colleagues who I've worked with who have been at my wedding and were there for me when my daughter was born and when my sister passed away, who I'm still friends with 15 years later, 10 years later. I'm still in touch with them. And I think you do spend most of your life at work. And so to have colleagues who are not only supportive in a professional setting, but also in a personal setting, like I really have been so fortunate to be able to create real friendship with my colleagues. I think having friends at work make the workday so much brighter, makes it so much better. That's something that's just been really important to me. It's nice to like and enjoy the people that you work with. And again, for people to know a little bit about your story or things that you've been through. And I think everyone has to do what they're comfortable with. Like you might not be comfortable sharing. And I guess a lot of people just want really professional boundaries with people they work with. They might not want to let them in. But this is something for me that was so big and it's something that's really important in my life. So sometimes I have to try to, in a new role or if I'm meeting new people, like figure out like a way to, sometimes there's no way, right? And be like delicate to share this, but I put it out there so people understand. I've been really lucky to have the space to share about that. And I've been lucky to have people who have checked in on me and get that this is a part of me. This is a part of my life.
That's incredible and beautiful. It sounds like you had an opportunity to be real and were received and heard.
It was funny because someone else was like, oh, this is my Wordle, like top score or something, like they love playing Wordle. And I was like, oh, maybe like it was too heavy of a share. Getting that later on. Like it was fun. It was fun. It's a funny story when I look back on it, but I think it was like just nice to be able to get it out there because there's no like other way really. I mean, you can tell people individually. This was like, here I am. I'm newish at this role. Like, this is what happened to me, a couple of years ago. And just a really big part of my life.
Let me ask you, are you able to sometimes comfortably confide in your other sister about work stuff? Say, I know you're close with her, but I know it can be hard because there's a translation barrier in terms of the legal profession and people that don't necessarily understand the particular stresses there.
Yeah, my sister is a dentist and I am super proud of her. She's 8 years younger than me, so I've always looked at her like a younger sister, but now, of course, she's adult, she's a dentist, she's married, she got a corgi, she's got a whole situation. And I'm just beyond proud of her and I'm fortunate to be so close to her. And it's interesting, we do talk a lot about career. We give each other advice, and though she's in dentistry, I'm in recruiting, learning and development role. I think she understands, like being in dental school, like just the demands that she went through and just like work-life balance and how stressful things can be. And going to dental school, she had a residency, she's worked incredibly hard. And so we do talk. I think I do confide in her. I do share with her just things going on in my workplace. I've shared with her every time I've made a job transition or a career transition. She is extremely close with my daughter. She's an amazing aunt and just showers her with so much love. And I am so fortunate to have that support system. So she really gets like what I'm going through just as like a working mother. She obviously also she was in dental school when my sister passed away and just remarkably was able to continue on and graduate on time. And just, she also relied a lot on her support system. Her friends and family and people in dental school really were there for her too. And so I think we've both had to rely on friends, classmates, colleagues, and people in our lives. And it's a very unique thing that we've both been through.
Do attorneys at your firm come to you as a professional development person with DEI questions or matters, or do those feel sort of siloed when you're at a big firm? I know you must have your own office for that, but I wanted to understand sort of the intersection between the work you do on a day-to-day basis and the DEI matters. And maybe blended question with the fact that you're a first-gen lawyer, how that informs how you approach your day-to-day business.
I always introduce myself and I say I'm the eldest daughter of immigrant parents. And I mean, that's not just apart from any other sort of identity that I have as a professional. I really think that captures the essence of who I am. I just remember being in law school and feeling like there weren't a lot of people that I could go to, like in administration or faculty, that like necessarily looked like me. So I think that's part of it too. If someone can come to me and say that this person I think might understand a little bit just based on my identity, like kind of important. I remember there was a student I had counseled, and they were South Asian, and after the appointment they sent me this email inviting me to their Diwali party that they were having, and it was so nice. I was like, wow, Diwali, New Year, and I was like, this is so nice, like this connection that I've been able to make. I mean, I think to see people that look like you is always important. And I think that, for me to have mentors or people who are diverse, who are maybe first gen, was really just helpful and making those connections. So if I can be a connection, I really do try. And sometimes, again, like I want to be able to support people or just to be seen in that lived experience of being a first gen student, having parents who are immigrants. So to be able to have those conversations, I know what it's like to feel like you're not represented or that you're not like really being heard or understood.
Lovely. Chaula, I am so glad to now call you one of my professional friends. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Greg. I really appreciate the opportunity.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to this episode of This Lawyer's Life. Opinions expressed are those of the speakers and not necessarily of the City Bar. If you enjoy this podcast, please like and subscribe wherever you listen. Find more City Bar podcasts on Apple, Spotify, YouTube Music, iHeart, or at our website at www.nycbar.org/podcasts. Be sure to check out Building Belonging, a podcast that embraces authentic conversations about DEIB solutions by amplifying the most marginalized voices in the legal industry and exploring spaces others dare not. This podcast was produced and edited by Eli Cohen.